Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Immergence Show, where we explore the future of immersive experiences and creative tech. Today, we're diving into something special, rethinking play through mixed reality. Our guest is Ingram Mao, a co founder of Techtoy Studio. His journey started at USC, where a student project using hand tracking and classical music got labeled just a tech toy. Fast forward, he's now redefining what spatial play looks like and just showcased his work at South by Southwest. We'll talk about how his team came together, why mixed reality is more than a medium, and how spatial interaction is changing the way we experience music and games. Drop your questions in the chat, invite your friends, and let's get into it. Welcome, Ingram. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me for the show.
Of course. Happy April Fool Day. I already saw some funny jokes on social media. But what we're discussing is not a joke. It's very serious. And I'm very excited to hear about your journey. It's very inspiring what you've done in this short period of time. And I hope it becomes, aspiration for others. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your journey.
Yeah. So I think you did a wonderful introduction of me. I'm the co-founder of Techtoy Studio. We are a mixed reality game design studio focusing on reimagining play in the era of spatial computing. And 2 years ago, I was actually still at USC as a grad student studying interactive media and games. Before I ventured into XR and gaming, my past life, I was actually an interior architect. I was trained at Pratt Institute studying interior architecture, and I worked as a architectural visualization artist for a couple years before I kind of changed my career path. Most of the team we have right now actually came from USC, actually originated from my graduate thesis project, where I was developing a hand tracking based VR city building game. So if you can kind of pull up the Zoom video of the game, I can give a brief introduction.
Sure. Before we get into all of that, just tell us an overview of your story and then we will get into the showcase.
Yeah, sure. So the team basically banded together. We had the privilege of working on an 18-month production in school. School had a very special program where students can take my thesis project as kind of a credit course as their capstone graduation requirement. So a lot of students take this very seriously. We eventually formed a 20 plus student team. We had 3 producers working side by side with me. I was the director at the time. And together we managed to pull off a 20-minute high quality demo. And I think that experience, that 18-month practice kind of pushed us together to kind of start the studio as a very serious thing. So after graduation, a couple of us banded together and we decided to, test out what we were able to do in school, whether we can actually make a real product out of it. So that's how we started making Symphony, a mixed reality rhythm game that just launched in March. The production also took around 18 months, more or less. And, near the end, we had the privilege of showcasing it at South by Southwest. And now we're officially a launch title at Meta, and looking forward to kind of continue working on it. We have a lot of exciting updates moving forward. And I'm very curious on where the future leads for the studio as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. What an exciting journey that is just getting started. And I can't wait to show some of the great work that you have. But I want to say hi to our amazing community for being here. We're so grateful. Havo, Jean, Felipe, Ian, we're grateful that you are here back with us. I know with Jean, it's quite late in Malaysia where she is. So I'm so grateful for all of you to, supporting this community. Hi, Shadi. And we're talking about this exciting journey. So your first VR project was the Neon City. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that was technically the first project of the whole studio where everyone worked on it together.
Amazing.
But yeah, I think the concept of this project really came from my background as an interior architect. I was trying to merge all my kind of past interests and expertise together. The appeal of this game really came from the concept of wooden block toys or playing with Legos. I was really interested in exploring something that was quite unique to hand tracking, to really imitate something that you can do in real life. And that was kind of the birth of the project. Another thing that was quite unique about this concept was the idea of space and scale, something that a lot of architecture or interior architecture students focus on. One thing we learned when we were students is to imitate scales in smaller miniature models or drawings. And I thought VR is a great representation of that, where different scales can be represented in real time at the same time. You know, it's almost a dream for an architect to see their constructions getting built. Like when you see your own design in a real building, that proud and that sense of wonder is something that's really hard to come by. Um, and and again, like construction takes a really long time, but in VR, however, you can build things almost instantly. You can showcase the scale almost instantly. And I think that was something that was really appealing and interesting to me, is to explore this concept of scale coupled with immersion. That's why in the game, you can see technically 3 different architectural scales. Obviously, you have the board in front of you where you can kind of play and place objects inside. And then in real time, you see this, what internally we like to call the Godzilla scale, because you're almost the size of a Godzilla where you can stand among buildings. And then what was really interesting here is when you do this gesture where you're kind of expanding the world, you actually get to see things in one scale. You get to see the human, the citizens dwelling inside, and really feel a sense of you actually built a living city. Now, obviously, this was a student project, so we face a lot of limitations. People are a little janky. We chose this kind of neon wireframe scale also because more or less of the scope, but very proud of the project. If technically the demo is on the Rift store, if you ever have the chance to try it, I do think it's a very wonderful, a very playful experience that we craft essentially.
Amazing. And to our amazing audience, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chats. We'll get to them as well. So what were some of the learnings that you had from this experience? I would imagine there have been a lot.
Yeah, I actually have to thank USC a lot for this experience. This program was designed to kind of simulate an actual game production. The professors are not really professors in this case. They really embody themselves almost like a publisher role, where there's like board meetings every week where we update on the progress. And because it was like 20 something part-time students, it was actually quite a challenging task of managing the production. Every student has a different, schedule, and obviously, a lot of my team were very, very talented, which I feel extremely lucky about. At the same time, we are all students, so we're kind of learning on the job at the same time. So there's these 2 big factors that you kind of constantly have to navigate around. What I am very grateful is that, because we went through the pipeline of, vertical slice, alpha, beta, we even have to actually pitch this project. I think the school had to choose out of 100 or 200 something pitches, that it really introduced us on like what might entail in a real life production. Obviously, budget was not part of the challenge in this case. But that said, like scope definitely is one. Managing the time, the motivation, and keeping 20 different people in the same vision, steering together, working on the same thing. That was obviously another challenge as well. And not to mention that because this is a VR project, it just makes it much more harder than, let's say like a 2D game development for students. So I think that's something very rare that students are able to pull off. In fact, I think faculties at the time were quite hesitant on green lighting a VR project because of just the inherent difficulty and technical difficulties and scope that kind of take place in a VR project typically.
Yeah, let's get into that topic of like what made you want to even do VR. In a gaming program, you probably have a lot of options. So, what made you choose VR, and what type of feedback did you receive because of that?
I think that's the beauty of graduate school, where it's a little different from undergrad. The curriculum is something not necessarily. I guess it also depends on the program. USC does have a very robust curriculum for most graduate students. But I came into USC knowing that I wanted to specialize in XR development. When I first tried a Rift, I think that was the moment where I was like, this is something that kind of combines all my past passion together, whether it's my interest in gaming, my passion for designing spaces, um, and inadvertently realizing that I'm way more technical savvy than my peers when I was in an architectural background. So I realized that all my strengths, my skill sets merged really well with this medium, and it is something that I'm genuinely passionate about and do believe in the future in. Um, so when I was entering grad school, that was kind of my focus. I was actually looking more for XR related programs, but there really isn't a lot out there. I chose USC because, first of all, at the time, I think gaming was still the biggest industry, the most applicable function for most devices, and also because I realized that there's a lot of overlap between game production and developing for XR app. Even if you're developing a non-gaming app, I think the nature of interactivity here becomes a huge challenge. The medium kind of breaks through the 2D canvas to something that's truly spatial and have depth. And I realized that's something game designers kind of deal with a lot more. So that's why I was interested in joining at USC. And when I was at USC, I actually went in with zero kind of programming knowledge. My background before was more in Unreal Engine. And essentially, every project we embarked on, I was like, I'm going to add the challenge myself. I'm going to do this in VR. And that just makes it twice as hard as what other students have to deal with. Like if I'm doing a Unity cube jumping around, I have to worry about OVR camera rig for programmers who dealt with VR. They probably know what I'm talking about here. So just constantly embarking myself in that challenge because of what I wanted to do, I think that really helped improve my skill sets very quickly and very rapidly. To the point, obviously, in the end, I was able to kind of execute a lot of my visions into tangible prototypes or demos or the project you just saw. And I think that's something I'm very proud of myself too. Is I like to call myself a generalist. I know sometimes people have a very bad impression with generalists as they're not good at everything. But in my case, I do think I have enough skill sets to touch on everything, whether it's programming, game development, or technical art, which is more aligned to my previous background, where I actually understand the pipeline, I can execute it myself. But more importantly, because I understand the pipeline, I'm able to kind of coordinate with the team, articulate which vision, requirements, features that we're exactly looking for. And I think that was something I learned most was steering the vision together, getting the team to band together, because eventually if you have a team, it's no longer an individual work. It might be the director's vision, but it truly is the product of the fruits, labors, and sweats of everyone putting it together. So I think I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to kind of form a student team together and we were able to make it as one.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And it's interesting that there are not many mixed reality programs. We're in this bubble in LinkedIn thinking that, it's like this is a future and present and like it's been around for some time. So you would imagine like there are programs teaching and educating the next generation, but maybe not as many. And I know our great friend Casey Jensen is working with Texas A&M. They're trying to do some stuff. I know MIT has the reality hack. There are like little programs here and there, but it's interesting that our education system is still catching up. Cool. So let's talk about mixed reality. I know that this symphony project, which we'll get into more in details, is in mixed reality, and with the new Apple Vision Pro and even the updated Oculus, it all is bringing us more into mixed reality. But curious, what are your thoughts about choosing that over a fully AR or fully VR, or WebXR? Like, what made you think about that? And can you educate us a little bit more about, what mixed reality really is, and what are the benefits of it?
So just to also tie into our previous conversation, I think the privilege of being a grad student for 3 years is that I had room to kind of learn different materials, absorb different perspectives. And the benefit of USC actually, they should really pay me to sell this, is I fortunately have professors like Scott Fisher or Mark Bolas who are really like the early precursors of VR. For example, Scott Fisher and Mark Bolas worked on the NASA headset in the 70s, the very famous picture of the headset with like 10 wires behind and then two gloves kind of holding in front of them. That was actually something they worked on in the 70s, which to imagine it's almost 50, 60 years ago. And I think they gave me a lot of exposure of what people have done research in the past, which is something that I was always very fascinated about. And one thing I actually recommend, if anyone's interested in mixed reality, is to look up Microsoft's mixed reality documentation. They, even though they may have abandoned the HoloLens, but I would actually argue they have one of the best introductions and documentations of how the concept of mixed reality works. And if you can pull up the image that I saved earlier. So one thing in the documentation that they introduced, obviously they came from the perspective of their Windows mixed reality headsets, which are like VR headsets that are kind of the cheaper version of Oculus, as well as a HoloLens. So very early on, they had both what most people would say like AR and VR devices. But very early on, they actually defined all of them as a mixed reality spectrum. This was way before, Quest 3 became a thing, pass-through became something that everyone can afford. And this phrase really came from the 90s from a research paper by Paul Milgram, as well as Fumio Kishino. So what they argue is that there isn't some virtual reality is a very enticing word, as if once you put on the headset you're in this other virtual world. But if you think about the sensory experiences that comes with it, even in the pure VR headset, you're only replacing your audio, visual, and sometimes your haptics if you're dealing with a controller. But most of your touch sensors, your proprioception, a lot of things still remain in reality. So in essence, it's still mixing, the real world and the virtual world. So defining it as a spectrum actually makes a lot more sense, right? Where this medium is really about a blend between physical and digital world. And one of the most, prevalent issues in VR, for example, motion sickness, actually came from a bad blend between the both, right? When you're just sitting there and then you realize you're in a roller coaster, it's going like 200 miles per hour or something. Your proprioception is still stuck in reality, yet your visual and your audio is telling you that you're going like 200 forward. And that's actually when things are not blended correctly together, as a very weird example to kind of illustrate the idea of the spectrum. And I think with HoloLenses, obviously Snap Spectacle, the Orion smart glasses, we're going to see more and more of this obvious blend when our visuals truly blend together with the physical world. Form factors aside, we actually do have the opportunity to actually experience these and much more expensive headsets to kind of see where the future is at. But what I'm almost certain of is this is going to be a much more fluid spectrum where, there's truly like a blend between the both, and the application shouldn't be really stuck on just like one spectrum. And I think Apple actually done a wonderful job on presenting that. For example, the crown on Apple Vision Pro, that was one of my personal favorite features actually, is that ability to allow you to blend between, fully real to something that's a very high fidelity environment surrounding you. And when we were starting it, I think the most prevalent mixed reality feature headset was probably Quest Pro. Quest 3 hadn't exactly came out yet that summer. We knew that this was slowly more and more going to become a thing. Pass-through is going to be a more affordable feature. So that's what we wanted to focus on, because for us, we really do believe that the form factor for XR is eventually going to lead to this blend. And not to dismiss any VR mediums. In fact, I actually think VR is great for games, especially if you want that full immersion, whether it's like fantasy or RPG or stuff. But one of the things you find is that a lot of the VR industry as a whole finds itself at a crossroad at the time. And I would argue still is today, where not only is it hard to kind of put on a headset, headset itself is clunky, but more importantly, there's this huge sense of disembodiment, right? When you put on a Quest 2, you're kind of blinding your eyes. You don't see anything. And then when you turn on, you get this very visceral, like pixels kind of feeding you all these very intense informations. Mixed reality headsets today technically are still the same, right? The reality is a reprojection of your environment. But that said, it at least presented a version that is much more grounded for people, as if they're actually seeing it surrounding them. And we believe that as a form factor actually allows a physical overlay of the thing through whatever material that people come up with, that I think it's much more acceptable for people. There's a much stronger connection to their actual environment, which makes things much more special, in my opinion. And for me, looping back into the spectrum thing, when I saw the spectrum, I realized this shift between purely physical and purely virtual is actually a wonderful canvas that people can play with. Why does it, like, there's a lot of experience and emotions that you can evoke through this transition, and I think that transition is something particularly fascinating for me, where what if virtual environments essentially becomes a reward mechanism for an experience? And I think that was actually the start of the project, which is very funny too, because the inspiration of this project actually didn't originally, the spark came from me watching a conducting orchestral performance in Chicago. But when I was thinking about the project in the very early on, in the very beginning, it was actually more about what was a interesting experience that constantly kind of tune you between reality and virtual, and how would that transition feel like? It's a very abstract concept that I think still kind of, you can still see echoes of that abstraction in the game today, but that was something of a huge interest of mine at the time, and I think that's also why we chose mixed reality.
Thank you for sharing. I want people to kind of see what we're even talking about. So let's play the demo, and then we can get into more details of that. Beautiful.
So I actually have another video to share that might articulate this transition a little better too, if you can pull it up.
Sure. Let's do that.
All right. So I can keep talking about this while this is happening. But as you can tell, like, essentially in the game, this maybe I should actually give a better introduction of the game as well. This is a rhythm game that combines magical wizardry with music conducting. So in the game, you're challenged to perform conducting inspired gestures, and as you do well in the game, you get to conjure these fantastical portals that transforms your living room. So we can obviously talk about the main juice of the game, which is the conducting, the interaction, the rhythm game aspect of it. Um, but like I was saying, the inspiration in the very beginning actually was more about that transition where you get to teleport into these magical realms. And essentially in the game, um, these environments are not something that just automatically happens. You automatically see that teleportation between the living room and these fantastical realms. It's actually a game reward mechanism where if you hit things correctly in the game, which is something of a very common challenge in most rhythm games, this is essentially a reward that you get to evoke. And that just makes these things all the more special and magical, so to speak, because it's not something that's really granted. It's something that you actually got to perform in order to get out of it. And that was actually the very original version of the concept without kind of conducting tied into it.
Very interesting. I haven't seen something like that before. Very cool. So maybe tell us what made you even choose the rhythm game, and like what are the differences, and explain what the rhythm game really is.
Yeah, rhythm game has been, in the game industry for quite a while, and obviously, I think a lot of people actually, I bet a lot of us actually grew up with different forms of rhythm games, whether it's on mobile or even in the earlier days like Guitar Hero, Band Hero, Rock Band, etc., etc. So it's a quite an established format for a game. I reckon most people play it for the flow, either the flow state. If you're a very hardcore player, you want to hit these very complex and hard patterns correct, or if you are more of a casual player, sometimes you just want different music libraries. There are different types of rhythm games as well. Obviously, I would argue that there are games that are really tuned towards very expert players like Osu. There are very casual types that Just Dance to me is actually one of them. Even though I know some people pull off like incredible, amazing dance moves there, which I have no skills whatsoever to imitate. Um, but I think Just Dance is more about the wide selection of music libraries that they were able to incorporate. In fact, they're still doing updates every year right now, even though Connect is no longer a thing. They're still on Switch and other platforms. So you can tell there's a lot of longevity with rhythm games. Rhythm games usually have three components that makes it sell. First of all, is its UI UX, obviously something that's simple, easy to understand, where every feedback is correctly mirrored. And then there is second thing is actually the feedback, where you get these results out of it, where that just leads you into a flow state. And the third thing is usually themes. Usually rhythm games have a very set theme of, Guitar Hero is about embodying you as that rock star holding a guitar. Beat Saber's fantasy is lightsaber in a club room, which is something that really hit and actually played really well with the VR medium, which is why it's still in the top 10 charts today. So we were, when we were designing, we were really looking to build these three elements in our own twist and our own language. Now, obviously, there's a lot of similarities between a lot of rhythm games. Timing, precision is something they always look for. When you're designing the UX, obviously you want to give a clear indication of the time. You want to give the clear feedback of the precision. And I think that's something, no matter which rhythm game you technically are looking for, even if it's like a twist of a narrative rhythm game, there's always some elements of that. And in terms of why we wanted to do a rhythm game, that actually, our journey towards developing this was quite a curvy road, which I think actually a lot of projects are. And like I said in the very beginning, when this was just like a concept, like no one was developing this, the idea that was in my brain was always about transitions, environmental transitions. I'm cursed to think like a interior architectural designer, so I think about spaces sometimes more than human, which is not something a good game developer should do, frankly. And the true inspiration that came from an orchestral performance. I was at Chicago. It was like an outdoor performance by the Chicago Philharmonic or the Chicago Orchestra. I forgot which. They were playing Tchaikovsky. It was a beautiful performance, and at that night, I had that brief moment of synesthesia. I think that's when these two concepts really combined together. Um, and I was, on my way back to the hotel with my wife. I remember when I was in the hotel, I was showering, and I just remember myself like waving in the shower. I always had this fantasy of, becoming a conductor, and I just kind of paused in the middle a little. I was like, this performance actually really feels it's like it's a very powerful and commanding, um, let's say it's not really instrument. It's a very powerful motion that gets to impact the audio, right? And I was like, what if I couple this with visual elements together? What if I marry that with the transition and really utilize, the headset's kind of spatial immersion or visceralness of it. And I think that's how the project really married together. Where I was trying to, in the very beginning, it wasn't even a magical theme. I think in our project, game design doc, we wrote something similar to kind of an audio visual spectacle with like Kandinsky inspired visual arts. If you're familiar with Kandinsky, he's a modern artist in the 60s who made a series of paintings based on symphonies. He has synesthesia as well. Actually, mine was like a very brief moment of hallucination. I think he actually sees visual things as he listens to music. Wonderful abstract artist. And we were trying to kind of mirror that experience and trying to paint that as a spatial canvas. So that was the original concept.
Thank you for sharing. I want to get into some of the design ideas and design concepts. If you can share with us, like, what's the design process like? What are some of the principles that you had to keep in mind and dictated to your team? And then what kind of like considerations and limitations you had to navigate?
Yeah. So when we started developing this, it was really just two people. It was me, my partner Ethan at the time, who first joined, and we had a lot of different ideas going in. We just knew it was conducting. We inspired, and we wanted to do something about these spatial transitions. And in a very early beginning, we actually had that debate of whether we make this more of a creative game or a creative experience or more of a rhythm game. Where rhythm game, technically, you're kind of told what to do because of the notes flying in, and creative experience is more something that's actually simulate conducting, where if you wave down, you hear music out loud. We did realize that the creative experience is much more complex in scope in terms of the audio feedback and kind of detecting gestures in real time at the time, because it provides a lot of freedom. It also provides a lot of possibilities that we have to consider. Whereas a game is more of a fixed thing, it's more predictable. At the same time, it did make it feel, ironically, less than conducting. But one thing we would argue actually is, freedom isn't necessary if you kind of imitate the experience or evoke the feeling out of it. And most people probably have no knowledge of what actual conducting is. Whereas if we can just bring that illusion in, maybe that's enough. So that's where the rhythm game concept really honed in.
That's really interesting. Sorry, because I was actually thinking, as you were explaining in the beginning, do you need to know conducting before you play it? And they were saying, no, it's really not necessary.
Yeah, and we can talk about this later too. But for us, we really want to introduce the concept of just like lightweight, very fun play. And if you think about play, sometimes for play, I mean, there's two types. There's obviously emergence play too, but in this case, I think, or like a very game design way of play, which is a very articulately set rules. But either way, I think establishing these rules and constraints are more helpful than not sometimes. For a designer, having freedom is sometimes the worst nightmare because then you have too many choices, which is a very ironic thing to say out loud, to be honest. But yeah, I can show you an early prototype actually.
Yeah,
So,
sure. And we do have a question from Tarun. What was the game built in? Was it Unity? If not, what software do you use?
Unity. I think for VRs especially, I know a lot of very talented Unreal developers using Unreal for Quest as well. But I do think Unity is the best toolkit. C# is just a wonderful language to get started. And yeah, we are Unity developers.
And when you create for Oculus, is there any way you can also use it for Apple Vision Pro, or that's a whole other language and a whole other medium?
It's just a different SDK in Unity. I believe I haven't been following this, so I might be wrong, but Unreal might have a SDK for Apple Vision Pro now too. So technically you can use it for Unreal as well. I would say because Unreal is more geared towards, AAA photorealistic graphics, virtual production, etc., it actually makes it more difficult to use. Ironically, because there's too many options, and because there's.
Uh-oh, I lost you. Are you there, Ingram?
Yeah, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes, but your camera is not on for some reason.
Let's see if we can turn it back on. Sorry about. Oh, there you go.
No
sorry
worries.
about that. Yeah, but because there's too many options that you can't use on a Quest headset or Vision Pro, you have to turn them off. And I think that makes it the more annoying for Unreal.
Awesome. I think your background is gone now.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. Technical difficulties happen as we're live. But I was just curious, now that you built the game in Unity for Oculus, what does it take for you to build something for Apple Vision Pro?
Probably not that much. And that's also something we're considering too, is to port to other platforms in the future and expand the audience. Quest is still where the majority of audiences are at. I still recommend targeting that. Apple Vision Pro is obviously a great device experience-wise, but I think the price point and amount of active users makes it not as appealing as the Quest platform at the time being. But obviously, as a developer, I look forward to more competitions. That's probably not great for Meta, but it is great for, I think, the industry as a general, is to have people compete with each other to try to race and make the better product.
Right, and there's Pico. There are so many other headsets out there too. It's an interesting world still with the competition. Cool. So do you want to show the prototype? I don't see it down here. If you want to remove those.
Let me share my.
For our amazing community, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat. We will get into them soon. And let's look into the early prototype.
I realize this is not the one, but this is. So this was actually one of the first prototypes that we developed. It was very chaotic mechanic. A lot of things actually did not work. The notes were flowing in very similar to Beat Saber. You have to kind of tangibly touch it. And then there's like this point where you have to tap around. We designed these very quick visual reaction prototypes. But this was really trying to mimic a lot of things that a conductor would do, which is kind of left hand is more expressive, they're pointing around, waving up, punching things. The right hand was really about tempo. So this is a 4/4 beat where it's like up, down, left, right, up. And it's kind of repeating that motion.
Did you work with the conductor to actually make this more realistic, or did you have to learn it yourself?
Both. Fortunately, had some music friends who did have training with conducting. I think that's asked a lot of stupid questions. Saw how he kind of did what performance would be. A lot of YouTube videos. I was just studying, how Bernstein was doing it. Sometimes I was less helpful because he was literally conducting with eyebrows sometimes. That's actually a video if you're interested in checking it out. And yeah, so it was a mixture. And right now, the game actually is less accurate. In the very beginning, I was still a little more rigid. I was really trying to imitate that feeling, so I was following the rules a lot more. And as we got more comfortable with it, and also because mapping was kind of delegated to someone else in our team, we were like, take that as an inspiration, but really make it into a fun and entertaining experience. So a lot of rules were unfortunately broken if you're an actual conductor.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, when you're designing a game, that's a little bit different from the real thing. And I'm curious, did you have any specific emotions or user experiences in mind when you were designing? Like, were you looking to bring awe or curiosity, or like what type of kind of user experience you had in mind beyond just wanting to create a conducting experience?
So that's actually an excellent question. One thing, because I came from USC, one thing our program preached is actually what Tracy likes to call the play-centric experience, which really evolves around player experience goal and design goal. That's something that you absolutely have to set early on in the project. So our experience goal was pretty interesting. We wanted to give players the feeling of power of altering audiovisual spaces through these conducting inspired gestures. That was a very abstract thing that obviously doesn't translate well to a solid experience goal. And I had a very weird solution for that, which was kind of for my vision in the very beginning, which my team helped me kind of morph this to something better. But originally our idea was each song or each musical album was technically a different emotion that we're trying to evoke. I was really trying to reference that wheel of emotion where there's anger, joy, sadness. And we literally named the album like that, where anger is anger, sad is sad, joy is joy. And then with each album or each emotion, so to speak, we were trying to design audiovisual feedbacks around that, really trying to mimic that emotion. The gestures were supposed to mimic that emotion or expression. The visuals are supposed to kind of complement that as well. Then we realized, from a marketing perspective, calling it or just player experience wise, if you go into the game, you see the word anger, it's not a great feeling, so to speak. So that's something we kind of evolved and changed. That's when we were also realizing this experience is actually quite magical. Why don't we double down on this magical theme? That's when we decided to make it more appealing, where instead of direct emotions, it was more thematics. So now we have like fairy dream, dark magic. So the experience goals suddenly became more concrete. It was like more about you feeling a genuine sense of wonder in all of them. It's even in the previous emotion thing, it was about wonder. But when you say wonder and anger, it just doesn't really marry well together. So the experience of what the player is kind of going through is quite vital, whether it's about designing the pattern of each song or the visuals. And in this case, for our game, one thing we really wanted to do was to create a variety of them. So each album technically does have a slightly different experience and motion that we're trying to evoke.
That's awesome. Has the game been launched yet?
Yeah, we launched on March 6th. So also,
Amazing.
yeah, less than a month
Congrats.
ago. Thank you.
So I highly encourage everyone to go check it out if you have a Quest headset. And Shadi has a question saying, do you ever watch people play and think, well, this is, they're playing in a way we never expected? Is that possible, or they have to follow the guidelines?
Yes, and it's a mixture. It's a mixed response for me and my partner too. Sometimes it's not necessarily a positive thing, but that's why we preach, iterations of prototypes and playtests. Actually, I really focus on playtests, and that's something I think any XR development should focus on because this medium is so new. Uh, there's a huge gap in terms of prior practices and experiences. So it's very important to actually put your prototypes, your design intentions into the test. One thing that's very clear to me is from an experience standpoint, what the developer envisions a product is very different from how a customer experiences a product. Because from a developer, you have the back end logic in your head. Because you're going to do this.
Yeah.
This is how the concept came to be. You already know all the instructions. You're the tutorial, right? And then from a player, they don't know anything. They're coming in blind. So they're just like, they will perceive it in a completely different perspective and angle of what a developer might be. And that becomes even more visible in VR. So I do believe that playtest is important. And a lot of times I find that when you're in these playtests, you find users doing things that completely is out of your expectations. Sometimes it's actually a very good thing, though. When you find users are repeatedly from multiple playtests that they're doing things that are completely out of your expectations, but they're mirroring the same gesture, then that's a very powerful signal to say, like, maybe you should design around that. And that becomes a very excellent channel of iteration where once you put that to the test, once you see the other perspective, you get more insight of how it actually gets done. What is the most ideal way for players to experience?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Shadi, for the great question. And I know that you had a kind of demonstration and showcase at South by Southwest, which is famous for their music, scene and activations. So maybe tell us a little bit about what made you choose South by Southwest, and like how was the experience, what was the feedback and everything, and if you have any video or anything you want to share.
Unfortunately, I don't think I have any videos at South by. Should have pulled that up actually. But yeah, very fortunate that South by Southwest picked us actually. So I was actually hesitant to file the application even in the beginning, but I was working with Lucas Risotto, who was a previous South by Southwest winner. He strongly recommended it to me, and we applied. Unfortunately enough, the program curator, Blake, really liked the project, and I think that's why we were selected. So it was really a privilege to be there. The experience was really amazing. We had 9 to 11, 3 days of showcasing it. All kinds of people showing up from all over the globe. So I think I'm pretty proud to say that we might have just converted a couple people into purchasing a headset too. That's always the best feeling when the experience is good enough that people are like, how do you play this at home? And then that's definitely one of the best feelings too.
You need to get an affiliate link from that.
Yes, I definitely should ask that. But yeah, and also I guess that's also quite a privilege to, we launched around the same time as South by Southwest, so seeing both in person, seeing the in-person reaction was also quite validating as well. And the team we got to be in Austin together for the first time, and seeing Austin and South by Southwest is truly a very, very amazing experience.
Amazing. And in terms, like, what was the learning from seeing people, experiencing it? Was there anything exciting and different from those feedbacks?
I think the demographics were interesting. Um, we we did realize that a lot of Europeans and Japanese people specifically really loved the experience. I think Japanese players surprised me the most. I remember one of the most striking one was a 40, 50-year-old something Japanese guy. He never played VR before. He went in, and usually, if they're 50 plus, maybe this is bad design from us, but they usually struggle a lot with interfaces in MR in general because it's just so new and foreign to them. Um, but for him, it was, and for a lot of other older Asian Japanese demographics, they somehow feel very familiar with it. And the tutorial was something very simple for them to do, and they were able to pick up the songs really quickly and scale up the difficulty way faster than even a lot of younger players. And you find them like extending their time slots just playing and then completely losing the sense of time. And when you take out a headset, when they take out a headset, I ask them what they do, and they're like, "Oh, like I'm an executive working at Shinkansen, the Japanese railroad company." I was like, "What?" But I think because a lot of these people actually, even in the 70s and 80s or 90s, when they grew up, when they were young, they played a lot of arcade. And I think that experience probably helped form a lot of earlier knowledge of how a game should work, which made these older demographics in Japan actually pick this game up a lot quicker. And I think that's something we're also interested in exploring to target more is most VR gaming market is in the US, but I do think that promoting an international audience is also something quite exciting too.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yes, there's just so many unexpected learnings from putting ourselves out there. And again, thanks to our amazing community for all their engagement. Feel free to ask any question as we're approaching towards the end. Ian, you're amazing. Felipe, Shadi, Tarun, Jean, Casey, everyone who's tuning in live or watching the recording, we're so grateful for you. And so let's talk about the future. Would love to hear what you think about this industry and, kind of like where we're heading, what's changing, what's your observation of now building in this space? What do you think needs to be done? Basically, everything you think will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I know in XR it's kind of interesting. We keep going to conferences and think that it will get mass adopted in the next 5 years, and then it really doesn't. But I don't know. I'm personally very hopeful it's finally happening with the glasses and everything. But what are your thoughts?
I think we also have to talk about the past just a little bit.
Sure.
I think the metaverse wave did more damage than good for this industry. And I think it's very interesting with this lane of technology is even when the technology is not there, people are already imagining what the ultimate vision of it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see it when Rift first came out, people have this very unrealistic expectations of what this device can be. But really what they're saying is what they want this to be, right? And Ready Player One, whether it's the novel from years back or even that film Spielberg directed where people are like, that's what I want VR to be. And then when they get in the headset, they're like, oh, this is, horrible. This is nowhere near what I envisioned, right? And I think that's where the problem of this industry is the expectation is so high where you still need like step by step for it to grow. And in my opinion, it's actually growing in a tremendously fast pace. And obviously, it has come at a cost of very huge expense by certain companies. Meta specifically is pouring a tremendous amount of money for this to happen. And I don't see this diverting anytime soon. For Zuckerberg, this is his personal ambition. And you're seeing even last year more and more players entering the space. there's a rumored Samsung headset. Google has a operating system. So I think things are actually moving in the right track if you think about it in a macro sense. Orion is particularly exciting, I think, for a lot of people. That is the form factor that everyone dreams about. Obviously, the price does not meet the reality yet, but at least I think what was helpful about the Orion glasses was instead of saying like in 5 years there's going to be a form factor like that, the conversation went from we don't know what the form factor is to like it's going to be Orion, but we need to do this and that in order to keep the price down and to make something that's actually consumer ready. But that said, I think this industry is nonetheless still very early. 10 years, I wouldn't call that a very established industry whatsoever. It is a very complex industry because the technology stack is so deep, both on the hardware and the software perspective, that it is very challenging. Yeah, I would say if you're interested in going in, it's definitely tumultuous. And I think earlier VR developers will have an even stronger feeling of that. They obviously gone through much more up and downs than even we do, but even the short 2-year span, I definitely had my own kind of bumps of ups and downs as well. But if you truly believe in this medium and you're actually passionate about it, I think there is a bright future ahead. It's just the path forward can be a little bumpy and uncertain sometimes, but that's, to me, is also what makes it exciting as well. So consider that a challenge for me. But I definitely also am quite bullish about where this industry is heading towards.
Amazing. I can't wait for, Augmented World Expo in June and, all the exciting stuff that we're going to see there. And hopefully I'll get to see you in person there. But yeah, tell us what's coming up next for you now that this great project has been launched. What's ahead? How can we all support and follow your journey?
Yeah, we're actually working on a pretty big update for Symphony. The development journey for that actually is not done yet. So we're actually looking to incorporate a custom song editor where players can upload and play their own symphony. So that's very much in the works. We're quite excited about that. We're making an extension of the game in PC where you actually have these like timeline editors to create your own kind of symphonies, whether it's the mechanics of rings flying in or particles spawning out. So you get to create your own map, which is something that's been an exclusive pleasure for us. So we want to share that feeling too. So if you're a musician, you're interested in uploading your own song, turn that into a game, I think that would be a perfect platform. And yeah, we're also thinking about developing some other projects too. Can't say much about that right now, but pretty excited to get into prototyping again. The early development is always fun when there's so many potentials. You don't know where your idea is going, and get to go back and forth with the team. And this time, we started with only one person to 2 person and 4, and now we get to start a new project together as a 4-person team. So I'm quite excited about that too.
Awesome. Congratulations on all the success and all the exciting stuff that are coming for you. And I want to encourage everyone to try it out. This game is fun. I personally need to go try it out too. And tag us if you post about it. Make sure you tag Ingram and our show and, give us feedback. I'm sure it will be helpful. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Ingram. This was awesome. What a interesting journey, going from, students and working with students to now building something really sustainable and changing the industry for good. And thanks to Ian, Felipe, Shadi, Tarun, Jean, Casey, Chris, Lauren, Vlada, all the amazing folks, Havel, who took their time to be here. We appreciate you so much. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Next week, we have Simone from Amazing Zebra, the company that our friend Casey Jensen is from as well. And we'll continue our conversations about the latest and greatest in emerging tech and immersive experiences. Thank you so much, Ingram. Have a lovely rest of your day, everyone. Bye.